Welcome to the Burgash Bulletin, September 2018. Very, very fortunate to have some special guests here with me today. The gentleman to my left needs no introduction, Mr. Quint Studer, former president of Baptist Hospital, founder of the Studer Group, currently CEO of Studer Community Institute. To my right, my brother, Gary Burgash, circuit judge for 11 years. Prior to that, 6 years on the Escambia County School Board, retired United States Marine. To my left is Jack Brown, County Administrator, Taylor County. He's been here in Escambia County for 4 years, doing a great job for us. So we put this panel together so we can talk about some very important community issues. And again, I'm very fortunate and I appreciate everyone's time for participating today. We put out some questions, and the main thrust of today is we want to talk about things that the government can do with the private sector to make lives better for citizens. And so we'll start this out, and I'll throw it over to you, Mr. Studer. How do you think the public sector can best support the private sector to spur intelligent development?
I think one of the things is to really make sure that there's expertise on both sides.
Okay.
Tom Murphy, when he was here at Civicon, the mayor of Pittsburgh, said you really want in any community your elected officials to have strong ethics, a strategic plan, and one of the things he talked about is to always have good expertise. Because I think private developers come in and they're looking for the best deal.
Yeah,
But
right.
It might not be the best deal for the government. And I really think that the government needs to make sure that they bring in outside expertise, and sometimes they get hit for that. You know, you go to bring in an outside consultant, and I bring one in, I'm a genius for bringing an outside consultant from another city, and you bring somebody in and they're saying, well, you're spending money, you should have done it yourself. And I think we have to allow elected officials the resources to come in and evaluate good projects, because that's what we want. The second component is really consistency. And when I've traveled the country, since my new book came out, Building a Vibrant Community, the question I almost get all the time is, what's the best thing a government can do to spur private development? And it's not just incentives. You know, everybody does that. It's consistency. So what are the guidelines? What are the rules? And don't change them. And I think what I've seen sometimes here, not with the county, but with the city particularly, is things will change. And I think that's getting better. But I think you want consistency and not rule changes as we go along. And I think once you have that consistency, that guidelines, along with, again, you want smart people on both sides, I think we should have win-wins. And that's what everybody should want, is win-wins.
Right. And now that we're on the subject of private-public cooperation, first and foremost, congratulations to the Wahoos going to the playoffs for the fourth straight year, setting some records. But that is a great example, the Maritime Park. That's a public-private partnership. I mean, it was public land, and you and a team went out. And tell us a little bit about how that evolved and some of the hurdles that you went through doing that.
Well, I think one of the things that happened is when you looked at that, I didn't know what it's one of those things, if you knew what you were getting into, you wouldn't get into it.
Yeah, we know about that with OLF8.
No, and that's really, I went to a session one time and an entrepreneur said that one of the main things about starting a company is don't do a lot of research. And I'm thinking, well, that must be wrong. He said, no, if you do research, you never start a company because 80% of them don't make it
Right.
1 year. So I think, once again, that's that situation where you've got to make sure, if you do a public-private partnership, that ultimately the private player is sustainable, but as importantly, the public player is sustainable. So it has got to me, raise value of property around it, raise the assessed property value, and create the wealth. So, for example, since the Community Maritime Park came in, the assessed property value of the downtown has gone up 24.9%, and that doesn't count the new apartment building, the new office building, the 2 new office buildings, the new hotel, because that money is important, because that money goes for schools, goes for police, and safety is key, and goes for fire. So I think it's where you have to be transparent, both win. And like Tom Murphy said, when a private developer came in and said, I got a good deal for you, to say, well, I'll tell you if it's a good deal for me, what's in it for you? So I think it has to be open books, that the private developer says, here's what I'm going to make on this project. Here's what I'm going to put into this project. And here's why your public entity will help me do this. It'll either help me build it, help me finance it, help me sustain it. But the ultimate goal has to be to raise the overall wealth of the community.
Right. And that's been a fantastic thing that we've seen in Pensacola. I mean, downtown has come alive. You've got a lot going on at the SOGO district. We've got the Maritime Park downtown. We've got a lot of things happening. And now we have your property. By the way, the board, we're very thankful for what you've given us. We gave him the latitude to negotiate with you, and we're looking forward to that. What kind of
How do you
ideal.
negotiate with somebody that's giving you something?
I know, well, exactly, yeah, and that's something else.
Well, pay us to take it.
Well, what would you like to see us do with that? I mean, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
Well, I think it's really important. What we want it to be used for what Crossroads says would help the community.
Right.
And Crossroads study, and we all agree. We were all very open. Jack was open, you and I have been open. The hoteliers I talked to are open. You don't want anything there that's not going to be sustainable.
Right.
And I think we run into trouble is getting so excited because we can build something.
Right.
We don't realize that we've got to support that something. People got very upset at Judy Bentz for pulling the plug on the Maritime Museum downtown. She did so not because she didn't have the money to build it. She did so because she didn't think she had the money to operate it.
Right.
And that was courageous on her part, but she took some hits for it. So first of all, you want to make sure something little down there will bring people from outside of this community in.
Right.
You want local use, no doubt, but local use won't pay for it.
Right.
It'll bring tourism and so on. Now what you want to make sure is if it really does bring those numbers, that'll make it so the point that it'll be sustainable. That means it can hold its own weight and it can operate. Now what it will do, if that happens, it'll create all that West Side will start exploding.
Right.
So one of the things that somebody said to me, they said, well, you don't want it there because people that come in for these sports things don't want real expensive hotels. I said, if there's enough people on the sports thing, somebody's going to build hotels down there.
That's right.
The market will play. And I think when you bring in thousands of kids with their parents, because we've done that, Rishi and I, when we had our kids, we'd go to some place like Panama City, stay in a hotel, then you'd go play a game, then you'd maybe walk the mall for a while, or go to a pizza place for a while, or sit in by a pool for a while. But we hope what it does here, being downtown, which was Crossroads, the consulting's #1 recommendation, it drives the downtown.
Right.
And that's where I want to commend the county. You know, the county, when you look at what the county's done for us, even though sometimes they would have to, they've always been very supportive. You know, from the Southtown apartment buildings with helping with the parking garage. So the county, even right now we're talking about, here's a piece of city land that we're going to donate to the county, and the land that's going to go around it might add value will be the city land. But again, city taxes, county taxes.
That's right.
We've all got to work together, and I think you've always brought that to this community, and I commend you for it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Studer. And I'm sure you're aware, we're bringing another 1,300 jobs to the airport. We signed a big deal last night with the county, $10 million we're going to infuse into that ST Aerospace project. So we'll have the #1 credit union in the world, Navy Federal, and we'll have the #1 MRO in the world and the second largest MRO operation in North America. We're very proud of that. And really hats off to Mayor Hayward for that. He's put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, and I've talked to the mayor almost every day this week, and one of the things I tell people is you can try to do too many projects, and then you can go a mile wide and an inch deep. And you're better off picking your winners, staying deep with your winners and putting your money in your winners. And I also want to commend the county for passing the covenant for the community.
Yeah, we talked about that.
People that aren't aware of that, that means if there's county funds spent, 70% of the jobs have to be local. Because when you're building something, it's wonderful to build it, but if all those people that work on it take their money and leave town, that money doesn't go around 7 times. What we have found in our projects too, Commissioner, is a place will end up doing more training. Because if they've got to hit that 70% number, they're saying, I can either try to bring somebody in and pay them a premium dollar, or I can take this person and train them to do bricks, train them to do framing. So we have seen a lot of minority jobs in particular. Southtown's a great example. That's about $25 million in labor cost, and almost $11 million of it went to minorities in Escambia County.
Wow.
That would have never happened. And I
If
think
you didn't have the covenant with the
if they
community.
didn't have the covenant, it wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
But now, what happened with and going on, Maritime Park, we did about the office building there, we did 31% minority, about 70-something% local. When we got to the urban core office building where Clark Partington is, because the people building the Maritime now had identified workers, it got easier to hit the covenant.
Right,
When we
'cause you
got
had
to
'em-
Southtown, it even got easier to hit the covenant.
Right.
Because you'd identified all these workers and subcontractors that you could come with you. So once again, I hope the city follows the covenant. I hope ECUA follows the covenant. I hope Triumph follows the covenant. But Escambia County, through your leadership, and Commissioner Robinson, who brought it forward, and Lumen May,
Yes.
who's been with us from the very beginning. Really, we're keen. Of course, we appreciate Commissioner Barry's vote, too, on the 4-1
Absolutely.
vote.
No, absolutely. We think it's a great idea. You know, the only trepidation we had was, you know, a private business has a lot more latitude in terms of the law and what they can do.
Absolutely.
So we want to do that. We want to comply with the spirit of that as far as we can.
As far
according
as
to the
you
law.
can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we're building the jail, I know one of the things I've heard my counterpart, Commissioner May, say is we should do that same sort of thing that you did with Southtown out at the jail and make sure that the minority, the service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses, they all have a shot. These businesses that don't normally get to participate in these big contracts. So I'm very proud of that, too. Well, we're going to move on to the next question here.
Well, you know, one of the things I think that businesses look for is not only consistency, but a business-friendly government,
Yes.
local government that understands that all growth is not good growth. You
Bingo.
know, you want to make sure you're getting the right growth. And the other thing is that you're dealing with a body that can make a decision and stick with them through the process.
Right.
You know, and try to keep infighting down, because, you know, a lot of people coming in don't want to be part of the controversy. They want, you know, to come in, do their business, and have a good partner moving forward that reflects good not only upon the community, but also their business when they come in.
I think that's so vital, what Jack said, because when you do an investment, you want to know what's going to go next to you, what's going to go around you. And that's why I hope the city of Pensacola passes the form-based code, because it at least says, here's some rules, here's some guidelines. Because, you know, one of the reasons we bought so much stuff is we kept getting scared of what's going to come next to it, what's going to come next to it.
And you can control it if you own
Well,
the
you
property.
put a big investment, like when we went into Belmont DeVillers and took Gus's record shop, which was in disarray, and created Five Sisters, we said, well, we better buy that building over there. And I think you shouldn't have to do that. Not everybody can. So I'm with Jack. I think having those rules and those guidelines of what can be built and also what can't be built is really important. And that's hard, like you said, Judge, making those moral judgments, because you might get a neighbor mad. You might get somebody politically powerful mad at you because you're not going to vacate something. You're not going to give them a deal. But you've got to always lead with your values of what's better for the long-term health of any community. So you nailed it on that one.
Well, I think the other thing you look at is it's got to work for all the parties. And one of the things that's encouraging to me about the donation from Quentin Rishi for the field house is we sat down and had a very frank conversation. He knows our budgetary limitations, and he said, hey, it's got to work for you guys. It can't just work for them. It can't just work for the PSA, or you know, but it's got to be financially sound for us, because, you know, it's not the deal that gets away that kills you in business. It's the deal you make that you got to live with.
Oh, absolutely. My father-in-law does commercial real estate in San Diego, one of the most expensive housing markets ever, and he says, Jeff, it's easy to get into a property in the wrong neighborhood. He says it's impossible to get out.
Right.
He says he sleeps on deals, he thinks about it, he before he makes a deal, because again, and I'm sure you've run into this, Mr. Studer, you know, you buy in the wrong area, it's a really tough situation, and you can't get out from under it, and you end up losing money. So, yeah.
But he's right. I think even with this, we're saying let's take a look at it. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right.
And it might not work because Crossroads might say the market's different.
Right.
It might not work because the numbers don't work. So we've all talked about no hard feelings.
Yeah.
Let's just all work on this together and see what we end up with. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
And one of the things we talked about last night at that dais was we've got to update that study, because the market has changed. Panama City's online now with a big field house. Baldwin County now has a field
Yes.
house. I mean, a lot of things have changed. The market has changed. So yes, we definitely
Yeah,
need
we
to.
met with them. I met with them Thursday morning at 7:30, and that's what I was real straight with. It's got to be objective, because nobody, you know, I don't know why, you know, I live in this community, and everybody should feel like this. Last thing you want is people point and say, my God, look at the albatross he put around our neck 5 years
Yeah, you
ago."
don't want that.
I think people did that over the years with why is the treatment plant there? And
Oh,
I'm sure when they
yeah.
did it thinking it was the right place.
Right.
But that's why Ed McMahon, when he came in at Civicon, said sometimes the best deals you have are the ones you don't do. And you have to be careful, because Tom Murphy said the decisions you make now for elected officials aren't short-term decisions.
No.
Somebody's going to live with them for decades.
Long time. And once you make them, sometimes they're very difficult to change.
Right.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to move to the next question here, and I'll throw this one out to the table. What do you believe are the best local examples of cooperation between the public and the private sector that benefit all the citizens?
Well, I think you brought up, I think Community Maritime Park ended up being a pretty good one. I think it's going to get better. I think because it's certainly going to open up the ECUA, the parcels, the Bruce Beach. Things take a lot longer than they think. I remember when I first came here, there was a scathing article about Aragon not being full.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's pretty full. And I think in Pensacola, they'd want Disney to all be built one day. Walt couldn't have done it in pieces.
No.
So I think that's a good one. I think the Brownsville Masonry Program, I think that's a good one. I think our E-Day on the apartment building where we could put in a parking garage that's hidden but keep rents available for workforce so it's full, so you hit the market. I think those are some real good examples of some private-public partnerships.
And I would say this too, if we're able to do the field house and work that out, I think that'd be a great example
That's
too.
another good example.
Yeah, because the hoteliers will benefit from that.
Big
When
time.
they do these out-of-town travel tournament teams, parents come, the kids come, they spend money in the restaurants and the hotels, they go to events, and that generates bed tax for the hoteliers. And
You know what I found out too from the Crossroads people? There's certain things that when the economy's down, don't go down as deep. So for example, when the economy's down, it's great having University of West Florida here.
Oh, yes.
Because when the economy's down, universities actually do better.
Yeah.
They said people will shortchange themselves, but they won't shortchange their kids.
kids, that's right.
They'll still go to these tournaments, they'll still go to these places, and that's where I think we could have a nice advantage, because we are going to be the only one that has a place like a downtown
Right.
that people go to, and they can tie into the stadium. They can do also the tie into the new Y. So there's a lot of activities that this could help. If it works, it could have a lot, like you said, the hoteliers could be huge winners. of
oh,
this.
big time.
And
big
if we
time.
can connect them through walkability, right, or riding
Yes.
bikes, I mean,
That's a key. You could even have bike rental. I mean, I think bike rental would be neat. And we have Jeff Speck, who's the guru of walkability, coming to Civicon here in a couple of weeks. So
Wait,
that's exciting.
will you plug that? When is that going to happen?
I think that's like September 21st or something like that. That'll be here, not this week, but the week
Just
after.
signed up for it again.
Probably a Tuesday. He is the guru of walkability. He's got the #1 book on walkability on Amazon right now. The next week, we have James Fallows, who's wrote for The Atlantic and New York Times and that. Him and his wife spent 3 years visiting small communities, and he wrote a book called Our Town. So he's been on Meet the Press and that. He's coming in. Then again in October is probably the one that's the most exciting, and that's Donald Shoup. He's sort of the guru of parking, and he's at UCLA, and he's coming in to talk about, what's he seeing in parking, because there's always that short-term fix. Build a parking garage. Well, that might make sense, it might not make sense. And again, there's no cookie cutter for
Right.
everything. You have to look at what makes sense for the long-term.
If I come to that, do you think he'll speak with us about our parking issues out at Pensacola
Oh,
Beach?
sure.
I know
Sure
he
he
will.
would.
Yeah, because I'd like to hear.
In
I'd like-
fact, DIB wants him.
Oh, I bet
know,
they do. I bet they do.
Yeah, I think he would, because I think the beach is a wonderful resource. It's like, again, Robert Renke told me that it's so cool now because you have a beach and downtown.
Right.
Because a lot of places have beaches, and a lot of places have downtowns,
They're not
but they don't have both, and we have both. But you've got to certainly figure out the park, not the parking for the hoteliers, because they have their own parking.
Oh, yeah.
On site, but it's the parking for the other people that might want to come there.
And that's the big issue. Yeah, Jeff.
The exciting thing to me is, and one of the things that really attracted me to Pensacola when I came here and looked, as this community I really want to live in, is the creation, the recreation of a sense of place. And, that's what we've done, you've done with Maritime Park, Jackson Square, all the great restaurants downtown, the walkability. And that's so much better than when you go to so many towns. I've got one of my best buddies, Vince Long, is the county administrator for Leon County. Tallahassee, they got FSU, they got everything, but they really don't have a sense of place downtown.
In fact, they're almost an outlier.
Right.
According to Gallup, if you have a university and a state capital, you should have a great downtown.
And they don't.
And the examples are Madison, Wisconsin, Austin, Texas.
Austin,
So the
Texas.
fact that I was surprised too the first time I went
Right.
there. And that's, again, it's sort of neat. This last year I've spoken in Destin, Panama City. So who would have thought years ago somebody in Destin would be asking people in Pensacola?
It's great.
Yeah.
I like that. That's
to come
fantastic.
talk about it. So I think what people want is a sense of place, a sense of purpose. It's interesting about young people, because this really started out as how to keep our young people home. Young people want a sense of place, even on places they've never had. They want that feeling of the old neighborhood, but they've never lived in an old neighborhood. Sort of like I want Norman Rockwell, but I wasn't there at the time. So when we did amenity studies of what do young people want, young people, and I'm talking about like 20 to 35, wanted the same things the 55 and plus want. Judge, they wanted, like you said, walkability, the ability to bike, the ability to leave their car.
And be safe.
Yeah, when we pull into the Southtown parking lot, my wife sort of says, you can tell some of these people aren't using their cars because they're just covered. They're covered with some things. And I think that's one of the things we did a poll recently, because you don't want to have like downtown versus the rest of the county.
Right.
And what's really neat is 72% of the people or so that live out in the downtown county, so the thing they're most excited about is the vibrant downtown.
Yeah.
So they see that as their downtown.
Well, you
just
got
like when I
people-
was in Chicago.
You've got people now from the suburbs of Escambia County wanting to move downtown. They want to sell the house, get rid of the lawn work, move into one of these nice apartments or condos
Eliminate
or
the
lots.
commute.
Yeah, and not have to worry about the commute. And like you said, walk to nice restaurants and shops. I mean, that's what's happening in Pensacola. It's very exciting.
And it's been a big
Yes.
turnaround since 2000, and since when I was a kid, you were a kid.
Oh,
I
it's
graduated
changed.
high school at PHS at 85, you were 86. I mean, downtown was dead.
It was.
dead, and now it's come back, and Palafox is a vibrant street.
It's an amazing place.
And I think the other thing, Quint, is people want to be able to walk and be safe.
Safety is probably our biggest concern right now. If you look at our polling, and probably nobody polls more than me.
Oh, I know.
And safety's a big issue. And what we found out is people want to see the police officers. It's not a sense, so they want boots on the ground.
Right.
I mean, if
The
I was
cop
running-
walking the beat.
If I was running for office right now, my message is, if I'm elected,
Right.
I'm gonna put more people on the street, more boots on the ground. Now, your arrest thing can look different, Judge, because if you don't have boots on the ground,
Sure.
you don't have people being caught.
There's many criminals.
Right.
Or people are afraid to turn in. But I think safety is the number one issue right now. We've had to put extra
The
security.
technology can help us, cameras, drones.
Ton.
Because if the criminals, and I see them every single day, and I tell them, I said, look, the day of the average criminal is about to come to an end. I said, the military is using drones. I mean, I was in Iraq in 2003. Things have changed dramatically, and these technologies have even used in the military, and Jack was a military man as well. Now they're coming home, and if you can make us more
Now,
safe,
we've got Southtown, our whole garage is cambered.
it's amazing.
And yet we do have people there because people still want to see people.
Sure, it doesn't eliminate that, but it makes them feel
Yes.
much more safe.
Safety would be my biggest concern right now downtown. We've still got to make sure that it's safe. And, this year we have break-ins in like East Hill.
Right.
Right.
So I think safety is an area that we've got to continue to focus in on if we're going to
I
continue
feel safe
to grow.
downtown in Palafox Street, and I think that's,
Sure.
but if we can really
Start spreading
eliminate
out.
that criminal element, and again, it's opportunity, right? Because if the younger folks have an opportunity to get a job, and if they're educated correctly, and they have role models, then they don't pursue that line.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
asked Tommy Lytle if I could drive with him and I drove with the police chief this last year, and it was pretty rough. We went to a hotel that, a woman was in there. They saw a boy sitting out in the parking lot, so they wondered why he's not in school. So they pulled over. Well, he wasn't in school, but his mom was inside the hotel
Right.
for an hour while he was out there.
Yeah.
And we've still got too much of that.
And that's related to the drugs, I can tell you, because though prostitution and drugs go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And the drugs are legion, and once people get started, it's hard to get them off of the drugs.
Yes.
And I see it with, I run the Veterans Treatment Court here, and a lot of our veterans come back and they've got legitimate injuries, and then they get hooked on opioids, and then they get pulled back, and then they're seeking, heroin or something else to fill that void. So we've got to be so careful with drugs, and
You know,
it's
I
a
think that
slippery slope once you go down.
Ties you right back to the covenant with the community and providing opportunities, because a lot of times it's a loss of hope.
Yeah.
It's, we have generational crime, we have generational
Poverty,
incarceration.
yeah.
Yes.
And we have people that, unfortunately, some of them expect that's what they're going to do at some point is go to jail.
Well, that's a great
And
segue, guys.
We've got to create that hope for them.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's a great segue to our third question. Are there areas where the private sector can work with the public sector and the judiciary to make justice system locally more efficient for the benefit of the citizens? I'll throw that one to you, Gary. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a difficult one because sometimes government and private sector with the judiciary can be a difficult topic, and how do you handle it? But we do have bright, shining areas, and one of them I'll go through is the guardian ad litem program. So
Yes.
you have kids that are in the delinquency, the dependency. So in the juvenile system, you've got two systems: kids that are abused, abandoned, or neglected are in the dependency system, and then you have the delinquency where they get in trouble. So typically, what we see, and I've been a judge almost 12 years, and I've served in the juvenile division. So the kids in the dependency wind up, as they get older, age into the delinquency, and then they age into the adult system. So what we've found is the guardian ad litem system is a bright, shining light there, because we get volunteers who are willing to give their own free time. And when I pick juries, I say, look, this is the only time your community wants your service. The draft ended in 1973. So before that, it was, service in the military was mandatory, and then you had jury duty. Today, it's only jury duty. No one wants to give their time. We're all so busy. We pay people to cut our grass, we pay people to cook for us, we pay people to do everything. But these volunteers help these kids. So I just pulled the statistics. We have 278 guardian ad litems who volunteer their time.
Here in Escambia County?
Just in Escambia County to help with the kids. And then, Mr. Studer and I were talking about, the 30 million words with Dr. Susskind. If we can train the parents, and you're doing a great job, you got to get them, birth to 5, before we get them at VPK, where you and I work with the school system. We got to get these kids young, but the guardian litems out there can help with that training. So we've got great volunteers there. And I'll tell you, throughout the justice system, we have that. We have small claims court, less than $5,000. You come in, if there's a dispute, you get a judge. But typically, we have mediators that help. And without the volunteer mediators, the justice system comes to a grinding halt. We've got in Escambia County about 30 of those.
Volunteers.
Volunteers, they're typically military, so they're retired. And, military folks, let's face it, we're volunteers. I mean, a lot of folks are, but the military tends to be volunteers. They run the camps, they run the scouts, they do a lot. Everybody does, but the military tends to have that. So we've got a lot of military retirees running these programs, and they help us. So the justice system, and then you've got Connie Bookman, you and I were speaking about Pathways for Change.
Great program.
501, or they C4, C3s, whatever they are. We've got the Clinton Cox House for the females who are, a lot of them are veterans who need transitional services, and they get supported by the Blue Angel Foundation. So there can be a partnership, but that's on the justice system. But I really am concerned. I sentenced people today. I had sentencing. People are convicted. They come to me for sentencing. 2 mothers came up, and they've got kids that are 19, and I saw one that was 17. No father. Never had a dad. When at the age of 14, these young men start, or young boys who becoming young men get in trouble. And without that male role model for a boy who's now 6'1", and 150, 180 pounds, it's so difficult. So we really need more mentors in the schools.
Mentors.
And I think, my wife, your wife with the PTA, there's just so much that we can do. But when I ran for judge, we had the pastors in the community said, well, hey, what are we going to do about the high incarceration rate of males, and specifically black males? And I said, look, by the time they come see a circuit judge like me, it's a felony. It's, rape, murder, aggravated battery. There's not much I can do. I can't release them back in the community. They have to be punished. We got to get them as kids. I'm on the school board now. We need to bring mentors in to read to these kids. So we're doing well. We can do more. We do have some examples here, but I'm telling you, to get these kids when they're young, you were in education. You taught, didn't you, for a few years?
10 years.
So Jeff's taught. I was on the school board. My mom was a teacher. My wife's a teacher. We got to get these kids even before they start school.
There's a failed, reading program that was a great initiative, but fell short, called Reading First. But the thing I really liked about it was their mantra was catch them before they fall. And that's one of the things I really like about working with Commissioner May a lot is, he understands that you got to get them when they're young. And, the school system, illiteracy, if they're not reading at grade level, it's really hard.
Well,
by 3rd grade, if they're not reading at level, they get further and further behind.
That's right. And then
The Bring Bag Initiative, Achieve Escambia, is really trying to take that on. I like the dashboard, Quint, that you guys are doing for the community.
That way you get a snapshot of exactly where we're at. And it's interesting that they combine Santa Rosa and Escambia, so you can really kind of see that there's some differences between
There
the two
is.
counties.
There
And
really are.
Yeah.
In fact, we did it first together. Ooh, it doesn't look bad. And then we
Yeah.
put it apart. Looks a little worse than we thought.
Yeah, we got some work to do
You
over
know,
here.
all of a sudden, the kindergarten readiness maybe is like 73 combined. And then you
Yes.
pull them
Right.
apart, well, Santa Rosa might be 80-something, and Escambia is much lower.
Well, that's just a challenge that we're going to have to keep trying to meet. I know that the mentor program, we had up to over 1,000 mentors at one point a few years back, and unfortunately, that program has diminished. But there is no shortage of need. These kids need, a father figure, a male figure in their
And
life.
to maintain a great community, we have to have a great community, meaning crime, education, because if you have a stalled education system or you have rampant crime and you don't address that, it's difficult, because I think we see it with Navy Federal, and you've probably done more statistical, you probably have this broken down more than I know, but anecdotally, I think, and I see this, people that work at Navy Federal Credit Union, they live in other places. They go to Santa Rosa, they go to Baldwin, and not a lot of them stay in Escambia,
Well, what we
kids
found,
especially.
What we found, Gary, on that was, and because I looked into this when I was on the school district, when I was on the school board, the folks that are in the lower echelon jobs, many of them do actually live in Escambia County. The people that came and relocated to Pensacola, because I've
From
spoken with Debbie
Virginia.
Calder, yeah, the ones that had families, they came down here, and more than half of them ended up choosing going to Baldwin County, Santa Rosa County, Pace, Gulf Breeze, because of the school system. And when I was on the board, one of the things I said was we should give them preference to go to any school, and I was rebuked for that. And the thing is, you lose one family in a house, that's $2,000 a year in ad valorem. You lose a family with 3 kids, each kid generates $8,000 from the state per year. Those are young
for the
kids.
school.
24,000 this year, and our enrollments here in this school system, unfortunately, are stagnating and going down a little bit while our population goes up. And of course, Santa Rosa is going exponentially. So you mentioned the schools, and that's kind of a soft spot for me.
Well, you look at the school system, I was on the board in 2000, and I want to say that we had 43,000 kids here in Santa Rosa County, had like 14 or 15,000. You might have the better statistics
Right.
today, but I think we're up at 38,000 if you said traditional kids actually in school, not the,
Homeschool,
and all
yeah.
that other. So what is Santa Rosa now?
I think they're up to 28,000. They're bursting at the seams. They don't have money, and parents vote with their feet on schools, and that's a reality people don't like to deal with. But I've talked to them on the campaign trail for county commission, and I'm trying to get elected to be a county commissioner, and they want to talk about the school district. Well, why did you do this? And what about the bullying? And what about this? And I'm like, it's a problem.
We have to have a great community. We're going to have to solve that problem.
That's the elephant in the room, the dark hole, whatever you want to call it. There's no silver bullet. When you look at our pockets of poverty, which Student Community Institute did, there's pockets.
Right.
And in some of those pockets, we find 47, 40, 50% of the kids are ready for kindergarten, maybe. And that means 50% aren't. I always say, if you had asked me 2-3 years ago, what's the biggest issue in Escambia County, I would say our public school system. But being a teacher, I have great empathy
Sure.
for teachers.
The teachers are
So
great.
I don't want people to
No.
think I'm bad-mouthing teachers.
Sure.
No.
But then when you look at it, it's the product. And of course, Dana Suskin came in and did a paradigm shift with me. I started out that morning thinking it was a school district. I ended that afternoon thinking
It's a community.
these kids aren't ready. And if even VPK is too late.
It's too late.
If 85% of the brain is developed by age 3, then it's everything we pile in there between age 0 to 3. And that's why I commend the fact that we're in these hospitals right now.
That's
So
a great program.
every mom that has a baby in one of our 3 hospitals in Escambia County gets a tutorial and a brain bag that we provide. And we've done
Amazing.
analysis because we're working with the University of Chicago School of Economics. And when a mom gets done with this tutorial and the brain bag, they fill out a survey. And it sort of says, how prepared are you? How much did you understand how to sort of talk to your child and grow their brain before this tutorial? And its average is about a 6.4. And afterwards, it's a 9.5. Now, the challenge is it's going to take us a long time to get there. But we have no choice.
Right.
It's just a long time.
You have to
get
deal
there.
with what you have, and you're doing this to every new parent.
Yes.
Is it the dads too, or just the moms?
Well, it's whoever will do it.
Okay, perfect.
So it can be dads, but we know we got moms.
We got moms.
I hope.
Well,
Unless
part-
Well, it's a that's a great
Well,
program.
it's the only one in the United States of America. We're the pilot for the University of Chicago, and ironically, we had 2 things that they liked. Neither one are good. We had a high sense of poverty, and means we had a low sense of kindergarten readiness. So they were looking Now, the other thing we had were 3 hospitals willing to do this. And I commend all 3 hospitals for doing this. But it's long-term, but it will work. Because we find if a child's not ready for kindergarten, it's harder for them to graduate from high school. If a male, and you know this better than me, if a male enters kindergarten not ready, doesn't graduate from high school, 60% of them will show up in your place.
And that is the tragedy that I see, and I'll tell you this, and Jeff and I talk almost every day, but we have kids that are in sports, and he's got 3 kids and I've got 2 kids, and both my boys were adopted from Russian orphanages, so I'm particularly aware of the brain development, and when you
Yes.
bring home a child at 2 years of age
Yeah.
who has been neglected, and really not intentionally, but they're extremely poor where they came from, it's poignant to me and it means something. But he and I talk and we say, in America we get people beating their chests going, well, when my kid plays sports, I don't want no participation trophy. Now, I think sports are great. I think it teaches you teamwork and leadership skills and some things you need to know. But yet we give our kids participation trophies for school all the time. And let's face it, sports end for 99.9% of the folks either in middle school or high school, and definitely by the time they reach college, right? But that people want the participation trophy for their education. So when I was on the school board, not only are you given a diploma, you're given an attendance thing. No, we need to end and we need people to beat their chests on this. I don't want my son or daughter, but it's more sons, to get a participation trophy for school, and we're doing it to our detriment.
Yeah, they've lowered the bar, there's no question. When I was on the school
Well,
board,
that's what happens with pressure. I always tell people, kindergarten readiness is a test that you really can't wiggle.
Right.
Okay, but when the pressure comes on high school graduation, it normally pops up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a natural tendency to get the heat off. And the other thing we find out, another statistic I do want to say is, because we have a lot of young mothers in this community, 70% of young girls or girls that drop out of high school will have a baby before they're 18.
Right.
And that's, to me, the issue of Escambia County. And we have 2 Escambia counties.
You do,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I
There's no
see it.
question.
I ask people when they come in, Judge, I got to get back to my kids, and I hear 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 kids.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like I'm back in, the agrarian part of our society.
When
back
you had to have
100
kids to run
years
the
ago.
fields.
Yeah, and I'm like, what are their names? And they can't give them to me. Their ages, who's their teacher, they don't know. And it's just extremely sad. And then you see these names, and their kids come through the system as well.
Yeah, and we have some wonderful video of moms, because we're in a couple of housing complexes right now. We want to be in all of them. We go in every day, not me, but we have staff that goes in with the Institute and works with moms. And we've had pictures of moms crying. First, they feel bad they didn't do this with their other kids.
Right.
But they're realizing, I wasn't building my child's brain. Because we teach them how to work, we're all into how to run,
That's
how
right,
to
catch the ball.
jump,
Yeah.
how to do that, but not how to build the brain, and the brain's a muscle.
It is.
Yeah, the problem is if you're not reading to them, if you're not teaching them how to read, if you can't pronounce, if you have problems speaking enunciating the language, and then your kids are trying to learn phonetics, it makes it hard for
We
them.
got some neat things too, I have these decals now, and again, these aren't magic wands, it's a bunch of little pieces.
Sure.
But we have decals now that you can go put in neighborhoods, because we find if there's just cement, like we know, Randall Wells tells me that he sometimes want to come in this way to the ballpark. His daughter Caitlin will not come in that way because she wants to count the stairs, because we've numbered the stairs on the way up. So like Cantonment Rotary, we sell these decals, and you can go put them in a neighborhood. And they're the letters, the alphabet, the colors. And what we find naturally, if a mom and a child or dad and a child is there, if there's just cement, there's not a lot of conversation.
Right.
If there's something to talk about, all of a sudden they're talking numbers, letters. So that's another thing. We've identified 19 areas in the community that for really about $800 to $1,000, we could put these decals in every single one of them. Again, it's not the silver bullet, but it's going to be a whole bunch of little pieces that
Sure is.
eventually add together.
Well, and it's just thinking about it, thinking outside the box, and getting partners to spend that $1,000 to do it, and I think that's great. And it's good that we have conversations like this.
well, gentlemen, I appreciate everyone's time today, and I think this has been a fantastic conversation, but that's going to lead us into our final question for today, and it has to do with the schools and the communities, because as we know, schools and what happens in the schools ripples out and it affects the cities, the counties, it hits your courtroom, it affects gentlemen when they're trying to hire people for their jobs. So we have a governance model here in Escambia County that's a little bit unusual. I would refer to it as a throwback model. We have an elected superintendent of schools, and statewide, we tried to get it on the ballot with the Constitutional Revision Commission. We had it as one of the amendments, but it didn't make it. But it is on the ballot locally here in Escambia County, and I just wanted to get a sense from this table. My personal opinion is, out of 15,500 school districts around the country, there's just about a little over 100 that are left electing their superintendent. Most communities have figured out that it's much more beneficial to cast a wide net nationwide, find the specialists that you need to bring them in, pay them what you need to pay them, and get better results that way. And we found in the state of Florida, for instance, the lowest 10 performing school districts are run by these elected superintendents. So you can find someone to win an election, run your schools, but I would always like to find the very best guy in the country to run our schools, because we have some challenges in our schools. So I wanted to throw that out there as a discussion point. I know Escambia County has voted for this in the past, and they have always voted it down, but I certainly hope that this time around they'll look with a fresh perspective. And just wondered if you had any input on that, Mr. Studer.
Well, I'll do a whole 2 days on this one. It's real interesting. I was in Milwaukee about a month ago. They asked me to be a keynote speaker at an educational conference for 68 of the top school districts in the United States of America. So it's a pretty hefty group. Baldrige winners, all sorts of winners. And just out of curiosity, I asked the person who put it on, out of the 68 school districts, how many here have elected superintendent of schools? She looked at me like, I didn't even know that
What's that?
existed anymore. And I think what happens is, if you're from here, you don't know that it's abnormal, because it's always been like that. But it's abnormal. I think Mississippi now has made a rule.
They have.
They passed a law that you can't have an elected superintendent of schools. Now, I know people say, well, we're poor and we can't pay a lot, so we're not going to get a real talented person. I don't agree with that. I know private people that would put a ton of money into the table to boost that salary to get the right person. Oh, they're only going to stay a couple of years and leave. The average superintendent only stays like 3.5 years. You're still going to be a lot better off for those 3.5 years than you would have. So I'm a huge believer. I want a superintendent who doesn't worry about re-election, doesn't worry about campaigning, doesn't worry about I have to be every social thing because I'm getting votes. I don't care if they'd ever go to a social thing, unless it's a parent social thing. I want a superintendent that every single day wakes up and says, how do I make this the best place for teachers to teach in, the best place for guidance counselors to work in, the best place for all the great, speech therapists and support people, and the best place for students. And I think we have to go to a selected, if we're going to ever be a great place, we've got to bite the bullet. But I pulled this, and I will tell you it's a heavy lift, because people say, oh, but that's what we've always had. But I like having that leverage. Well, and I talked to a school board member who will wish her way anonymous today, and she said, if they have a superintendent of schools that acts out right now, they can't do anything.
That's exactly right.
If you had a superintendent of schools, not that you want it, and there was a problem, you could remove that person. Now, and that person might be in charge of the investigation of themselves. So it gets really, really difficult. And so, the last couple things, I don't think in Tuscaloosa they would have gotten Nick Saban if they would have just said, let's find a local resident to be our coach. I know sometimes people in the school district who I respect will say, well, I like voting for the elected superintendent of schools. Sort of gives me a little leverage. And I had a principal say to me, well, I like having an elected superintendent of schools. So I said, then why don't we elect you? So I don't think that's a good idea. I want to be hired, So I think, and this has nothing to do with who the current superintendent is.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that.
Right.
It's can you count on every year going out and hoping, or every 4 years, a highly qualified, trained, skilled superintendent of schools will run to office. I could go out and I could have went to these 65 superintendents who are all stars, and I could have said, I'd like you to come to Pensacola. So I've been there, it's nice, and they're on vacation, wouldn't mind it. I said, well, here's what you need to do. First, you need to quit your job and move here. Then you have to declare residency. Then you have to run for office, and you probably won't get elected because you're from out of town. So I think, though, it's a heavy lift. I told somebody today, if there's one thing that, I look at, you can't change a zillion things. So if I looked at if there's one thing I could change in the next 10 years that I think would have the most impact on the quality of life in Escambia County, it's moving from an elected superintendent of school to an appointed superintendent of school. So, Nadia, I hope I wasn't too vague on how
No,
I feel.
I think we know where you stand on that. Thank you. Jack, do you have any thoughts on that? Because Jack is kind of like, he is an appointed administrator, if you will. He works at the pleasure of the board. And so how do you, what's your thoughts on that? I know you spent
Well-
time teaching at Florida State. You've done a lot of things in education.
Actually, I was at the Florida Center for Research at Florida State. But I've seen it both ways, and I know that it's similar with principals. You know, one of the things that we found at different schools is, you know, it's all about the principal. And I think a lot of times, you know, there's a great book by Jim Collins, you know, where he had a research team and they were going to find out what made the 15 greatest corporations in America different. And they started off and they said, it's not about leadership. It's not about leadership. We're going to find out, you know, we're going to do all this empirical research. And at the end, they say, it's all about leadership.
It's all about
And it's
leadership.
about servant leader. So, you know, I think it's having the right person. Can you elect the right person, have the right person in charge? Certainly. I do think that certainly you as a county commissioner have much more control over me as an appointed administrator than if I were elected at large and you were elected district-wide.
Absolutely.
So I think there are, you know, pros and cons. I think if you make a mistake with your administrator, it's, you know, easy. I mean,
It's easy to
certainly my
fix.
contract comes up and the board says, hey, you're not cutting it, and or else you're doing a good job, but we want you to improve in these areas.
What about you, Gary? You served 6 years.
Well, I have my private thoughts. Unfortunately, as a judge, I'm not at liberty to give any opinion because they might think it might sway someone. So I would just say everybody needs to be educated about this, research about it, and make, you know, an intelligent decision is what I would say. Pay attention.
I will say, there's a group, and I hope I don't mess it up too much, but I now, I have to validate this, but I'm pretty sure the Pensacola Young Professionals, who are very, very important in driving the Community Maritime Park vote, because they saw it as a big part of their future. I believe they're going to come out and support going to a selected superintendent of schools, and because they think it's really an important part of our future here.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean you'll get it right, but I think you have a better chance of getting it right. And again, this is nothing to say anything about the elected superintendent here. It's more of a philosophical thing.
Yeah.
Or what are our best odds? And I will say, I believe there's a number of private citizens. I think some of these better football coaches get a little bit of dollars from private communities.
They certainly do.
Because I think we need a great superintendent of schools, because this isn't an easy school district.
That's absolutely true. And I'll wrap it up. I spent 10 years on the school board, and this is an issue that's very important to me. And now as a county commissioner, I see it coming home to roost when I talk to folks that own small businesses, and they have people that are graduates, and they struggle, local graduates, some of them struggle composing a paragraph or doing basic arithmetic, and they come to me as a former school board member and they say, how did this happen? And I think the pressure, the political pressure to perform has led to a situation where we've lowered the bar, the participation trophy, if you will. And so I think it's critically important that you raise the bar. And when you do that, you're going to have fewer people graduating on time, and you got to have the courage and the will to say that that's okay, because when we give a diploma in Escambia County, Florida, it means something. It means that when I go to work for an HVAC company or a hotel company, I'm going to be able to do basic arithmetic. I'm not going to need a calculator to count change back from a 20. I'm going to be able to count it. And these things, and the politics, you mentioned the politics of it. I'd like to see a guy in Escambia County.
Or a lady.
Or a lady, or equal opportunity. But I would like to see someone who's a specialist in social dysfunction, urban dysfunction, generational poverty. We have those issues here, and those folks are out there. You just got to go find them. You got to cast a wide net. You got to find the very best guy and bring him here. Someone with passion, experience, training, and someone who isn't beholden to some of the inside politics, inside baseball, if you will. You know, my cousin's uncle works here, so we got to do this. This principal's been here, and his uncle owns this company that contributes to my campaign. A lot of that happens. The nepotism, the patronage. We need an outside professional who is not going to be subject to those forces. And so I certainly hope, with Mr. Studer's support, Pensacola Young Professionals, I'll certainly be as vocal as I can be. We need a guy. We need the very best guy, not the very best guy.
Or a lady.
Or lady in Escambia County. I mean, I want to cast a wide net, and I certainly hope that people will be open-minded and look at this issue, because it's very important, very important. And
Well, one of the things I would tell you as a professional administrator,
yes, sir.
politics is not my realm, my responsibility, you know. And
Absolutely.
And I'm to stay out of politics, which makes it easier, I think, for the board sometimes.
Absolutely. So I look forward to it, but gentlemen, I appreciate your time, each and every one.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Studer, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Appreciate
Gary,
everything
thanks
you
for
do.
coming. Jack, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for watching the Burgosh Bulletin. Look back in the next 3 months and we'll do another one. Thank you.